The Healer King. My name is Aiden Vale. At 11 years old, I had two talents. The first was learning. The second was making people angry without even trying. Personally, I thought the first talent was far more useful. Unfortunately, some people disagreed, especially Lena Ashford and Marcus Reed, the two biggest annoyances in my life. First place again. The teacher pinned another paper to the classroom board, my paper. Several students applauded politely, others groaned. Marcus looked as if he had swallowed a lemon. Lena looked even worse. I returned to my seat. "Show off," Marcus muttered. I didn't even say anything. "You don't have to." I considered that. "Fair point." The students around us laughed. Marcus immediately regretted speaking. That happened often. I wasn't trying to be better than everyone else. I simply enjoyed learning. If a teacher gave us a book, I read it. If there was a puzzle, I solved it. If there was training, I practiced. Apparently that was enough to make some people jealous. Lena came from a noble family famous for producing powerful fire users. Marcus came from a military family known for strong water users. Both had spent their entire lives being told they were special. Then they met me. And suddenly they weren't always first anymore. They never forgave me for that. One afternoon after school, I sat beneath a large oak tree reading. A shadow appeared over the page. I already knew who it was. "Reading again?" Lena asked. "No," she frowned. I lifted the book. "Oh," Marcus rolled his eyes. "You're impossible." "Thank you. It wasn't a compliment. You should make those easier to identify." Several nearby students laughed. Lena crossed her arms. "Do you ever do anything fun?" "I enjoy reading." "That doesn't count." "According to who?" "Normal people." "Then it's a good thing I'm not normal." The laughter became louder. Marcus groaned. "Why do we even talk to him?" "Excellent question." The truth was simple. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me angry, frustrated, embarrassed. Instead, they usually embarrassed themselves, not because I was trying to humiliate them, because they kept picking fights they couldn't win. Verbal fights, at least. Physical fights weren't an option. Everyone knew that. Our kingdom encouraged children to train from a young age, not power training, not yet. That began at 12. But physical training started much earlier. Running, swimming, sword forms, fitness exercises, basic combat, I loved all of it. Marcus did not. Lena only enjoyed the parts she won. As a result, neither had much interest in testing themselves against me physically. 1 month before our 12th birthdays, the entire school became excited, because everyone knew what was coming. Power Awakening Day. The most important day in a child's life. The day our abilities would reveal themselves. 3 powers existed in our world. Fire strength, water strength, healing power. Nobody could choose. The power chose you. That single moment could influence the rest of your life. Students discussed it constantly. "What do you want?" someone asked during lunch. "Fire." "Definitely fire." "No way." "Water is better." "Healing would be awful." Several students nodded. I looked up from my meal. "Why?" a boy shrugged. "You don't get to fight, so?" "Fighting is cool. Being alive is cooler." The table laughed. The boy rolled his eyes. "You're weird. I've heard that before." The weeks passed quickly. Soon the day finally arrived. Power Awakening Day. The entire capital seemed alive with excitement. Families filled the streets. Banners decorated buildings. Children my age wore their best clothes. Parents looked more nervous than their kids. My mother checked my collar 3 times before breakfast. My father laughed every time. By the 4th adjustment, even I was getting annoyed. The awakening hall was enormous. Hundreds of children gathered inside. The king himself sat on a raised platform. Nobles, military officers, master healers, important guests filled the hall. The atmosphere felt overwhelming. Then the ceremony began. One by one, students stepped forward. One by one, powers awakened. A girl received fire. A boy received water. Another fire. Another water. The crowd cheered each result. Then Lena stepped forward. Red light erupted from the crystal. Flames danced around her fingers. The hall applauded loudly. Her family looked delighted. Lena looked even more delighted. She immediately searched the crowd. When she found me, she smirked. I rolled my eyes. Marcus followed several students later. Blue energy swirled around him, water strength. His family celebrated. Marcus pumped his fist, then gave Lena a victorious grin. Apparently they were already imagining themselves as legendary warriors. Eventually my turn arrived. The hall became quiet. I walked toward the crystal, placed my hand against it, and waited. Golden light spread across the surface. Warm energy flowed through my body. A peaceful sensation filled me. The result appeared moments later, healing power. The reactions were mixed. Master healers smiled. Many adults nodded respectfully. A few students looked disappointed on my behalf. Lena and Marcus looked thrilled. Absolutely thrilled. I knew exactly why. For years they had searched for something to use against me. Now they finally had it, or so they thought. The next morning the attacks began. "Look who it is," Lena announced. "The future bandage expert." Several students sighed. "Not this again," Marcus grinned. "Be nice." "Why? He might heal us." I sat down at my desk. "What a terrifying threat." The class laughed. Lena frowned. "You don't care? About what?" "Getting healing." "No, why not?" I thought for a moment, then answered honestly. "Because it's my power." The room became quiet. Even Lena seemed surprised. "You wanted healing?" "No." "Then why aren't you upset?" I shrugged. "Being upset won't change anything." The teacher entered before anyone could continue. The conversation ended, but the bullying did not. Months passed, then years. The insults continued. Most failed immediately. One day Marcus pointed at my training uniform. "Preparing to heal paper cuts." I looked at him. "No, what then?" "Preparing to heal the injuries you'll get from making bad decisions." The nearby students burst out laughing. Marcus spent the rest of the lesson glaring at me. Life settled into a routine: school, training, studying. Power development, repeat. At first, healing seemed simple: repair injuries, reduce pain, treat illnesses, useful, important, not flashy. Meanwhile, fire and water users learned impressive combat techniques. Explosions, powerful strikes. Defensive barriers. Students loved watching those demonstrations, especially Lena and Marcus. They never missed an opportunity to show off. At 13, school competitions began. Nothing serious. Obstacle courses, academic tournaments. Power control exercises, team challenges. I entered almost all of them, mostly because they were fun. Winning happened naturally. That irritated certain people. "Aiden wins again." The announcement echoed across the training grounds. Students applauded. Lena stared at the scoreboard. Marcus looked ready to argue with reality itself. I received the medal, then sat back down. "This is getting ridiculous," Marcus complained. "You say that every time. Because you keep winning. Have you considered winning instead?" The surrounding students immediately started laughing. Marcus buried his face in his hands. Even some teachers smiled. By 14, my healing control surpassed most students. By 15, instructors regularly used me as an example, not because healing was powerful, because I worked hard. Many students treated training as a chore. I treated it as a challenge. Every skill could improve. Every weakness could be reduced. That mindset helped me progress faster than most. Unfortunately, it also made Lena and Marcus even more frustrated. One afternoon during a training session, Lena accidentally burned her hand. Nothing serious, just a small injury. The instructor called me over. "Aiden," I nodded, placed my hand over the burn. Golden light appeared. Seconds later, the injury vanished. Several students applauded. Lena stared at her healed hand, then at me, then looked away. For some reason, that seemed to annoy her more than any insult ever had. By 16, everyone in our class had become stronger. Fire users could create larger flames. Water users controlled greater volumes of water. Healers developed more advanced techniques. Graduation was still 2 years away. Most students were already thinking about their futures. Military service, universities, royal academies, guilds. The future felt closer than ever. I thought life would continue normally. I was wrong, very wrong. Because before that year ended, everything was about to change. And it would begin with a decision made by 2 very angry classmates. The Healer King Part 2. By the time we turned 16, everyone in our class had changed. Some students had become taller, some had become stronger, some had become more mature. Lena and Marcus had become more annoying. At least in my opinion, not that they bullied me as often anymore. The problem was that every attempt had failed for 4 years. Eventually, even they realized it. Unfortunately, that didn't make them stop trying. One morning, our instructor announced a combat exercise. Not actual combat, just controlled sparring. Fire users would face water users. Water users would face fire users. Healers would support injured students afterward. The moment the announcement ended, Marcus smirked. "Looks like you'll be watching from the sidelines again." I looked up from my notebook. "Probably. You don't mind?" "No," his smile faded. "Seriously, why would I? You don't want to fight." I closed the notebook. "I enjoy winning. So why would I enter a competition designed for fire and water users?" Several students nearby laughed. Marcus groaned. "Talking to you is exhausting." "Then stop." More laughter. The instructor had to tell everyone to settle down. The sparring tournament lasted 3 days. Lena performed well, Marcus performed well, neither won. That fact annoyed them greatly, especially when they learned I had won first place in the academic competition held during the same week. Again. Aiden! I looked up. Lena stood beside my desk. The entire classroom immediately became interested. Whenever Lena approached me, entertainment usually followed. What? You know what's unfair? I thought about it. Taxes? Several students laughed. She rolled her eyes. I'm serious. So am I. No, you're not. Fair. The class laughed again. Lena took a deep breath. You're good at everything. Not everything. Name one thing. Singing. The room became quiet. Then someone remembered the school music festival, a horrifying event I had participated once, never again. The entire class burst out laughing. Even Lena struggled not to smile. Unfortunately for her, she noticed me noticing. Her smile disappeared instantly. I still don't like you. That's okay. Why? Not everyone has good taste. The classroom exploded with laughter. Lena walked away before she embarrassed herself further. Life continued. Training, classes, competitions, the usual, until the day everything changed. It happened near the end of the school year. Most students had already gone home. The campus felt unusually quiet. I was walking across one of the training fields when I noticed 2 familiar figures waiting ahead. Lena, Marcus. Neither looked happy. Actually, they looked furious. I immediately knew this wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. We need to talk, Marcus said. That sounds ominous. I'm serious. So am I. Neither laughed. Interesting. Usually one of them reacted by now. Instead, Marcus stepped closer. You think you're better than everyone. No, you act like it. No, you always have an answer. I shrugged. Would you prefer questions? Lena clenched her fists. For some reason, that answer seemed to make things worse. Years of frustration appeared on their faces. 4 years. 4 years of losing arguments. 4 years of comparisons. 4 years of teachers praising me. 4 years of feeling second best. I suddenly realized this wasn't about a single conversation. This was about everything, every failure, every embarrassment, every moment they had spent comparing themselves to me, and they were tired of it. You know what? Lena snapped. What? I'm done. Done with what? All of it. I sighed. That's very specific. Then she attacked. Fire exploded from her hand. For a split second, I simply stared, not because I was afraid, because I couldn't believe what she had done. Students weren't allowed to attack each other, especially not outside supervised training. The punishment for something like this could destroy a person's future. Yet Lena didn't seem to care. The fire struck my shoulder. Pain shot through my body. The force pushed me backward. Before I fully recovered, Marcus attacked too. Water crashed into me like a wave. I hit the ground hard. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Neither did I. The field became completely silent. The attack had actually worked. For the first time in years, they had managed to hurt me. Something inside me snapped, not physically, emotionally. Years of patience vanished. Years of tolerance disappeared. I wasn't angry because they attacked me. I was angry because they had thrown away everything. Their training, their futures, their common sense, all because they couldn't handle losing. The healing energy inside my body suddenly surged, far stronger than ever before. The familiar warmth became something else, something deeper, something older. A strange understanding filled my mind. A realization. Healing wasn't merely the restoration of life. It was the control of life itself. And if life could be strengthened, then life could be weakened. Lena raised her hand again. Another fire attack began forming, then she froze. The flames vanished instantly. What? Her face turned pale. The fire disappeared completely. Lena stumbled, her knees shook. She looked exhausted, as if she had spent days without sleep. What happened? For the first time in my life, I genuinely didn't know, but somehow I understood, instinctively, naturally. My power had done something. Marcus stepped backward. Lena tried lifting her arm. Nothing happened. The strength simply wasn't there. Fear appeared in her eyes, real fear, not anger, not frustration. Fear. What did you do? Marcus asked. His voice sounded smaller than usual. I slowly stood. The injuries on my body healed instantly. Burns vanished. Bruises disappeared. Pain faded. The process took only seconds. Marcus stared. Lena looked horrified. Then I noticed something strange. I felt stronger, not dramatically, not enough to transform me into a warrior, but stronger, as though some of Lena's energy had become mine. The realization sent a chill down my spine. I suggest, I said calmly, that you never attack me again. Neither argued, neither insulted me, neither even looked me in the eye, for the first time since we had met. Lena and Marcus were speechless. They left immediately. I remained alone on the field, trying to understand what had happened, trying to understand what my power had become, or perhaps, what it had always been. Over the next few weeks I began experimenting, carefully, very carefully. I couldn't tell anyone, not yet. Nobody had ever mentioned healing abilities behaving like this. If I wanted answers, I would need to find them myself. The first discovery came accidentally. I tested my power on a dying plant. Normally, healing energy restored damage. This time I tried something different. Instead of restoring life, I attempted to reduce it. The plant wilted immediately. I nearly dropped it. Then I reversed the process. Golden energy flowed again. The plant recovered within seconds. I stared at it for several minutes, then tested it again. Same result. Again, same result. Again, same result. The evidence became impossible to ignore. Healing and weakening, creation and deterioration. Two sides of the same power. I could do both. Naturally, I trained every day, secretly, relentlessly. The stronger my control became, the more possibilities appeared. I could make plants healthier or weaker. I could accelerate recovery. Or induce exhaustion. Nothing dangerous, nothing permanent, but enough to prove the concept. Enough to convince me that I had discovered something important, very important. Meanwhile, school continued, and surprisingly, Lena and Marcus changed, not completely, but noticeably. They still disliked me. That much was obvious. However, after the incident, neither tried provoking me as often. Whenever our eyes met, I noticed something new: uncertainty. They no longer looked at me the same way. At first I found it amusing, then I found it useful, because for the first time in years, they stopped wasting my time. The final 2 years of school passed quickly. Students became stronger. Competitions became harder. Expectations became higher. Everyone prepared for life after graduation, including me, especially me, because every day my secret ability grew stronger, and every day I became more convinced that healing was far more powerful than anyone realized, including me. By the time graduation approached, I had mastered skills nobody else even knew existed. And soon, the entire kingdom was about to discover them, because just as our school years came to an end, war arrived, and war changes everything, to be continued. The Healer King Part 3 graduation arrived faster than anyone expected. One day we were worrying about exams. The next day we were standing in formal uniforms, listening to speeches about our futures. Teachers congratulated us, families celebrated, students made promises to stay in touch. Some actually meant it, most didn't. That was simply how life worked. People moved on, paths separated, dreams changed, and sometimes, history changed them for us. 3 weeks after graduation, war began. The kingdom of Valoria had enjoyed peace for nearly 20 years. Unfortunately, peace rarely lasts forever. A neighboring kingdom called Draxon invaded our northern border. At first, most people weren't worried. Border disputes happened occasionally. Usually they ended quickly. This one didn't. Within a month, several forts had fallen. Military casualties increased. Supply routes became dangerous. And suddenly everyone realized the situation was serious, very serious. Like many healers, I volunteered, not because anyone forced me, because people were dying. That was reason enough. The military assigned me to a field hospital near the front lines. My job seemed simple: treat injured soldiers, stabilize severe wounds, help exhausted healers, repeat. Most healers never saw actual combat. I expected the same. For a while, I was right. The first thing war taught me was that stories lie. People talk about glory, honor, heroism. They rarely mention the screams, the exhaustion, the endless stream of injured soldiers. Every day felt longer than the last, yet somehow I kept working, one patient after another, one injury after another, one life after another. Aiden, I turned immediately. Another stretcher was entering the tent. A young soldier, severe burns, deep cuts, barely conscious. Several healers rushed forward. I joined them. The injury was serious. Normally recovery would require hours, possibly days. I didn't have days. So I pushed harder. Golden light flooded from my hands. The burns began fading. The bleeding stopped. The damaged flesh repaired itself. The other healers stared. One of them blinked, then blinked again. Aiden, what? That should have taken 3 healers. I looked down at the soldier. He was already breathing normally. Interesting. Over the next several weeks, similar incidents occurred repeatedly. I healed faster, more efficiently, more effectively. Soon rumors began spreading through the camp. Nothing dramatic, just whispers. The young healer, the unusually talented one, the healer who never seemed tired. I ignored them. There was work to do. Then the battlefield changed everything. A major battle erupted near the northern plains. The army suffered heavy losses. The field hospitals became overwhelmed. Eventually, commanders made a desperate decision. Additional healers would move closer to the fighting, including me. The battlefield looked exactly as terrible as you'd imagine. Smoke covered the horizon. Fire burned across damaged fields. Water users launched massive attacks. Fire users answered with their own. The clash shook the earth itself. Thousands of soldiers fought around us. Chaos surrounded every direction, and through all of it, we healed. At first, my role remained unchanged. Treat the injured, restore strength. Save lives, then something happened, something unexpected. A squad of enemy soldiers broke through part of our defensive line. Several injured Valorian soldiers stood nearby. Most couldn't even hold their weapons. The enemy noticed. They charged straight toward us. The healers panicked, which was understandable. We weren't trained frontline fighters. We were support personnel. The soldiers protecting us were too far away. The enemy would reach us first, for a brief moment. Nobody knew what to do. I did. Without thinking, I stepped forward. The enemy soldiers laughed. A healer, standing in their path, apparently they found that amusing. The laughter stopped quickly. I reached toward the leading soldier, not physically. With my power, the reverse side, the hidden side, the side nobody knew existed, the effect was immediate. The soldier stumbled, then slowed, then collapsed. His strength vanished almost instantly. Confusion appeared on his face, then fear. The same fear I had seen years ago, the same fear Lena and Marcus had shown. The others stopped charging. I targeted another, then another, then another. Each weakened rapidly, each lost strength, each struggled to remain standing. Within seconds, the entire squad became ineffective. Valorian soldiers quickly captured them. The battle continued, but the moment remained burned into my memory, because unfortunately, several people had witnessed it, including a commander. The next morning I was summoned. That usually wasn't good news. I entered the command tent cautiously. Several officers stood inside. Maps covered the tables. Military reports filled every surface. At the center stood General Rowan, one of the kingdom's most respected commanders. He studied me carefully. "You are Aiden Vale?" "Yes, sir." "The healer?" "Also yes." Several officers exchanged amused looks. Apparently my reputation had already spread. General Rowan folded his arms. "Would you like to explain what happened yesterday?" I considered lying, briefly, then dismissed the idea. These people weren't stupid. They had seen the battlefield reports. "Not particularly." One officer laughed. The general didn't. After a long silence, he asked, "Can your healing power weaken people?" Straight to the point. I respected that. "Yes." The room became very quiet. "Demonstrate." I had expected that. Fortunately, they brought volunteers, healthy soldiers, willing participants. Over the next hour, I showed them everything. Healing, strength restoration, fatigue removal, then weakening, energy drainage. Temporary exhaustion, nothing permanent, nothing dangerous, just enough. When I finished, nobody spoke immediately. Finally, one officer broke the silence. "That's absurd." Another nodded. "I agree." For a moment, I thought they meant impossible. Then I realized they meant powerful, very powerful. General Rowan stared at me, then smiled, not a friendly smile, a strategist's smile, the kind people get when they discover a useful advantage. "Aiden, sir, how would you like to help win a war?" The following weeks changed my life. Instead of remaining in hospitals, I began supporting military operations directly, not as a frontline fighter, as a force multiplier. Before major battles, I restored exhausted soldiers. After long marches, I replenished their strength. Before assaults, I improved recovery, and during critical moments, I weakened enemy forces. The effect was incredible. An exhausted enemy fought poorly. A weakened enemy moved slowly. A tired enemy made mistakes, and wars are often decided by mistakes. Battle after battle, Valoria began recovering lost ground, not because of me alone. Thousands of soldiers fought bravely. Thousands sacrificed greatly, but I helped, and people noticed. Eventually, even the king heard the stories. The royal summons arrived 3 months later. I read the letter twice, then a third time. Just to make sure, the king of Valoria wished to meet me personally. That wasn't a normal sentence. The royal palace was even larger than I imagined. Guards escorted me through endless corridors. Servants hurried everywhere. Nobles whispered among themselves. Finally, I entered the throne room and met the king. King Aldrich wasn't what I expected. He wasn't young. He wasn't intimidating. He simply looked intelligent, very intelligent. His eyes studied everything, including me. "So," the king smiled, "you're the healer causing trouble." I blinked. "Trouble? The enemy certainly thinks so." Several advisors laughed. I decided that was probably a good sign. Over the next hour, I demonstrated my abilities again. The king watched carefully, asked questions, requested additional tests. By the end, he looked impressed, very impressed. You realize this changes things. I suspected it might. The king nodded, then pointed toward a map. The enemy expects healers to remain behind the lines. Yes, they don't expect healers who can weaken armies. No, the king smiled. Exactly like General Rowan had, the smile of a strategist discovering a new advantage. From that day onward, my role expanded. I wasn't merely a healer anymore. I became an advisor, a battlefield consultant. Someone commanders actually listened to. The idea felt ridiculous. I was 18, yet experienced generals regularly asked for my opinion. At first I thought they were joking. They weren't. The war continued. Battles raged. Victories accumulated, and slowly, steadily, Valoria pushed the invaders back. One evening, after another successful campaign, I stood overlooking a military camp. Thousands of soldiers celebrated below. Music filled the air. Laughter echoed through the tents. For the first time since the war began, people looked hopeful. General Rowan approached. "You've done well." "We all have," he nodded, then looked toward the distant horizon. "The war isn't over yet." "I know." And I did know, because while Draxen was losing, something else was happening, something bigger, something far more dangerous, far beyond our borders. A kingdom far stronger than Draxen had begun watching us, and they didn't like what they saw. To be continued. The Healer King part for the war with Draxen lasted nearly 2 years. By the time it ended, I was 20 years old, and very tired, not physically, mentally. War has a way of exhausting people no matter how strong they are. Every victory came with a cost. Every battle left scars, even when those scars couldn't be seen. Fortunately, the final months of the war went far better than the first. Valoria steadily pushed forward. The enemy lost fort after fort. Supply routes collapsed, morale weakened, and eventually Draxen surrendered. The day the peace treaty was signed, celebrations erupted across the kingdom. People filled the streets. Musicians performed in every major city. Taverns overflowed with customers. For the first time in years, people felt safe. I attended the victory ceremony alongside generals, nobles, and military officers. The king personally thanked the soldiers who had served. Then, to my surprise, he called my name, Aiden Vale. Thousands of people turned toward me. I immediately wished they wouldn't. The king smiled. "Come forward." I did, mostly because refusing a king seemed unwise. The king handed me a medal, then another, then another. Apparently 2 years of service came with quite a collection of rewards. The crowd applauded. I nodded politely and hoped the ceremony would end soon. Unfortunately, the king wasn't finished. "Aiden Vale has saved countless lives." The applause grew louder. "He has strengthened our armies," louder still, "and he has helped secure victory." The crowd erupted. I considered hiding behind one of the generals. Sadly, none of them looked willing to help. After the ceremony, I finally escaped to a quiet palace balcony, or at least I thought it was quiet. Someone was already there. King Aldrich, of course. "You dislike attention." It wasn't a question. "No, Your Majesty," the king laughed. "I noticed." For a few moments we simply watched the celebration below, then the king became serious, very serious. "The war is over, thankfully." "Yes," he folded his hands behind his back. "But another problem has appeared." I immediately knew what he meant. The neighboring kingdoms. News traveled quickly, especially news about military victories. Our success against Draxen had spread across the continent, and unfortunately, not everyone was happy about it. The kingdom of Arcanes had ruled as the strongest nation for generations. Largest army, strongest warriors, greatest economy, most territory. Everyone feared them, including Draxen, including us. Now, for the first time in decades, another kingdom had begun attracting attention. Valoria and Arcanes didn't like competition. "We've received reports." The king looked toward the horizon. "Military movements," I frowned. "Arcanes," he nodded. "We believe they're preparing for war." The words settled heavily between us, because if Draxen had been dangerous, Arcanes was something else entirely. Several weeks later, the king called a war council. Every major commander attended, every military expert, every strategist, and somehow, me. The council chamber was enormous. Maps covered every wall. Military reports filled several tables. The atmosphere felt tense. No one liked the situation. General Rowan pointed at a map. "Their army outnumbers ours." Another commander nodded. "Their fire users are stronger." A third officer added. "Their water divisions are superior." None of the reports sounded encouraging. For hours the council debated. Defensive plans, offensive plans, supply routes, fortifications, everything. Nothing felt sufficient, not against Arcanes. Eventually the meeting ended. Nobody looked satisfied, least of all the king. The following weeks became frustrating. Everyone searched for an advantage, a breakthrough, anything, but nothing appeared. Then one afternoon, entirely by accident, I noticed something strange. I was walking through a village near the capital. Children played in an open field. Normally I wouldn't have paid much attention. Then two boys caught my eye. Both were water users, both appeared around 12 years old, and both were fighting, sort of. One launched a water attack, the other blocked it, not with a dodge, not with another attack. A block. The attack dispersed harmlessly. The boys continued playing. Neither seemed surprised. I stopped walking. Then one attacked again, the other blocked again, simple, natural, instinctive, almost effortless. I stood there for several minutes, watching, thinking, and suddenly, an idea appeared. Our soldiers always used water offensively, or fire offensively. Defense existed, but only in limited forms. Usually water countered fire, fire countered water. The process consumed enormous amounts of energy. Everyone accepted that as normal. What if it wasn't? The thought refused to leave my mind, so I tested it, personally. The next day I visited a training ground. Several water users agreed to help. The first attempt failed, spectacularly. A water attack struck me directly. Fortunately, it wasn't powerful. Unfortunately, it still hurt. The soldiers laughed. I laughed too, mostly because the alternative involved embarrassment. The second attempt failed as well, less painfully, but still failed. The third attempt changed everything. Instead of opposing the attack, I studied its movement, its structure, its flow. Then one water user attacked again. I reacted instinctively. A defensive current formed. The incoming attack split apart and vanished. The training ground became silent. Again, the soldier attacked, blocked again, blocked again, blocked. This time nobody laughed. Within hours, we repeated the process using fire users. The results were identical. The attacks weren't merely being stopped. They were being redirected, dispersed, neutralized, using far less energy than traditional methods. I immediately requested another audience with the king. The king listened carefully. Then ordered demonstrations, then additional demonstrations, then more demonstrations. By the end of the week, every important commander had witnessed the results. The kingdom exploded into activity. Training programs were rewritten. Military instructors received new orders. Thousands of fire and water users began practicing defensive control. Day and night, week after week, month after month. At first, progress was slow. Many soldiers struggled. The technique required precision, patience, discipline. Then breakthroughs started appearing. One unit succeeded, then another, then another. Soon defensive specialists emerged throughout the military. The effects were remarkable. Soldiers consumed less energy, lasted longer in battle, protected allies more effectively, and most importantly, survived. For the first time since the threat of Arcanes appeared, hope returned. 2 years passed, training continued, preparation continued, warnings continued, and eventually, the inevitable happened. Arcanes declared war. The announcement reached every corner of Valoria. People panicked. Merchants worried. Families feared for loved ones. Soldiers prepared themselves. Meanwhile, the king summoned me once again. The throne room felt unusually quiet. King Aldrich stood before a massive map. Several generals surrounded him. When I entered, they all looked up. The time has come. The king's voice was calm, but I could see the concern beneath it. We're ready, General Rowan said. The king nodded, then looked toward me. Aiden, your majesty, he smiled slightly. The idea that may save this kingdom came from you. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. Fortunately, the king continued. Let's see if it works. A few days later, the armies marched. The largest war in Valorian history had begun, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the strongest kingdom on the continent was waiting for us, to be continued. The Healer King Part 5, the war against Arcanes began when I was 21 years old. Unlike Draxen, Arcanes didn't underestimate us. That made them far more dangerous. Their soldiers were disciplined. Their commanders were experienced. Their power users were among the strongest on the continent, and their army seemed endless. The first battle lasted 3 days, 3 exhausting days. Fire lit the night sky. Water attacks shattered the earth. Thousands of soldiers fought across rolling plains. The scale dwarfed anything I had witnessed during the Draxen War. Yet something remarkable happened. Our defenses held. The techniques we had developed worked. Water users redirected attacks. Fire users dispersed incoming flames. Units protected one another with coordinated defenses. The advantages seemed small individually. Together they became enormous. Several Arcanian commanders noticed immediately. Their traditional tactics stopped working. Attacks that normally shattered formations were being blocked. Assaults that should have caused chaos were being neutralized. For the first time, Arcanis encountered an opponent they couldn't overwhelm through sheer strength. The war dragged on. Months became years. Victory remained uncertain. Both kingdoms suffered losses. Both kingdoms adapted. Both kingdoms refused to surrender. Meanwhile, my own role continued expanding. I no longer spent most battles behind the lines. Commanders frequently requested my presence near critical areas, not because I was a great fighter, because I could change battles. An exhausted unit could continue fighting after I restored them. A weakened defensive line could recover. Enemy assaults could suddenly lose momentum when opposing soldiers found themselves strangely drained. Again and again, my power altered the battlefield, not dramatically, not alone, but enough. One particular battle became famous throughout the kingdom, the Battle of Silver Ridge. Arcanis launched a surprise offensive. Nearly 15,000 soldiers advanced through a mountain pass. Their goal was simple: break our defenses, capture the nearby fortress, open a path directly toward the capital. The situation looked disastrous. Our forces were heavily outnumbered. Retreat seemed inevitable. Some commanders even recommended abandoning the fortress. General Rowan disagreed. So did I. Instead, we developed a desperate plan, a risky one, the kind that either succeeds brilliantly or fails completely. For 2 days, our soldiers intentionally withdrew. Arcanis interpreted the movement as weakness. They advanced aggressively, exactly as we hoped. When the enemy finally reached Silver Ridge, our trap activated. Defensive formations emerged from hidden positions. Water barriers redirected attacks. Fire defenses absorbed incoming assaults. The enemy advance stalled. Then counterattacks began. I spent nearly 16 consecutive hours healing injured soldiers, restoring exhausted units, weakening enemy forces, keeping the defense alive. By sunrise on the 3rd day, Arcanis retreated. The fortress survived, the capital remained safe, and Silver Ridge entered history. Stories about the battle spread rapidly. Unfortunately, many exaggerated my role, wildly. Some claimed I had defeated entire armies alone. False. Some claimed I could drain strength from thousands of people simultaneously. Also false. One particularly ridiculous rumor suggested I was secretly immortal. Definitely false. I tried correcting people. That only made things worse. Apparently, denying heroic stories simply convinced everyone they were true. By the time I turned 23, I had given up. People would believe whatever they wanted. The war continued. But gradually, steadily, Valoria gained ground. Not because we were stronger, because we adapted faster. Our defensive techniques improved constantly. Commanders learned new strategies. Soldiers developed better coordination. The kingdom evolved. Arcanis remained powerful. Perhaps more powerful than us, but they struggled to change. They relied on traditions, established methods, past victories, and eventually those advantages became weaknesses. The final campaign began during my 24th year. Both kingdoms knew the end was approaching. Neither wanted another decade of war. Something had to give. The decisive battle took place near the river Arlen, the largest battlefield I had ever seen. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers covered the landscape. Fire illuminated the horizon. Water crashed across open fields. The very earth seemed to shake. For 3 days, neither side gained an advantage. For 3 days, the outcome remained uncertain. For 3 days, exhaustion consumed everyone. Then an opportunity appeared. An Arcanian commander made a mistake, a small one, but war rarely forgives mistakes. General Rowan noticed first. I noticed second. Within minutes, orders spread throughout the army. Units repositioned, defenses shifted, the trap closed. Our soldiers struck precisely where the enemy formation weakened. Not everywhere, one location. One vulnerable point, one opportunity. The enemy line collapsed, then another, momentum shifted. By sunset, Arcanis began retreating. By dawn, they had surrendered. The war was over, finally. After 3 long years, peace returned. Valoria celebrated for weeks. Cities hosted festivals. Merchants reopened trade routes. Families reunited. For the first time in years, people smiled without worrying about tomorrow's battles. I thought life would finally become simpler. Instead, things became more complicated. Several months after the war ended, King Aldrich requested a private meeting. His message sounded unusually serious. When I entered the palace, I immediately noticed something different. The king looked tired, older. The years had finally begun catching up with him. We spoke for nearly 2 hours about the wars, the kingdom, the future. Then he asked a question I never expected. Aiden. Yes, your majesty. What would happen if I stepped down? I stared, certain I had misunderstood. Apparently I hadn't. The king smiled weakly. I've ruled for many years. You're still a good king. That wasn't an answer. I remained silent. The conversation felt dangerous, very dangerous. Eventually the king continued. The kingdom needs someone who can guide its future. He looked directly at me. Someone who understands change. I immediately realized where this conversation was heading, and I immediately disliked it. Unfortunately, King Aldrich was extremely persistent. Several weeks later, the council reached the same conclusion. Then the generals, then the nobles, then practically everyone else. To my horror, they wanted me. At 24 years old, I became king of Valoria. The coronation felt unreal. Thousands attended. Millions celebrated. Meanwhile, I spent most of the ceremony wondering how exactly my life had reached this point. A decade earlier, I had been a student arguing with Marcus and Lena. Now I wore a crown. Life is strange. Fortunately, becoming king didn't change my goals. If anything, it clarified them. The wars had revealed countless problems. Damaged farms, weak trade networks, economic struggles, resource shortages. If Valoria wanted lasting prosperity, military victories weren't enough. We needed growth, real growth, so I began researching. Relentlessly, months passed. Then one discovery changed everything. Deep within a remote forest, scholars identified a rare plant species. The plant possessed remarkable properties. Under normal circumstances, it grew slowly, extremely slowly. My healing power changed that. When I applied healing energy, growth accelerated dramatically. Days became hours, months became days. The implications were enormous. Agriculture improved immediately. Farmers produced larger harvests. Medicinal plants became easier to cultivate. Food shortages decreased, profits increased. The economy responded quickly. People became wealthier, trade expanded. The kingdom flourished. Then I started asking another question. What about fire users? What about water users? For years I studied their abilities, observed specialists, analyzed techniques, tested theories. Eventually answers emerged. Water users could do far more than fight. Working together, large groups could influence rainfall, direct water supplies, reduce droughts, improve irrigation. Entire farming regions transformed. Harvests increased again. Fire users experienced similar breakthroughs. Instead of focusing exclusively on combat, they began supporting industry. Metalworking, manufacturing, large-scale construction, energy production. Factories became more efficient, tools became cheaper, infrastructure expanded. The kingdom changed rapidly. Then my 25th birthday arrived, and with it, an idea. The celebration became the largest event in Valorian history. People traveled from every region. Cities decorated streets. Musicians performed. Markets overflowed with visitors. At sunset, thousands gathered outside the capital, waiting, watching, wondering. I stepped onto a raised platform overlooking the crowd. The entire kingdom seemed present. Then I released my power. Golden light spread across the horizon, across fields, across forests, across farms, across gardens. Plants strengthened, crops flourished, trees revitalized. Entire landscapes transformed before everyone's eyes. The crowd fell silent. Then cheers erupted, louder than anything I had ever heard. People laughed, cried, celebrated, because for the first time everyone could see the future, not a future built on war, a future built on growth. Years earlier, people believed healing existed only to support stronger powers. Years earlier, some families looked down on healers. Years earlier, even students had mocked them. They were wrong. Power wasn't determined by how loudly it exploded, or how impressive it looked, or how much destruction it caused. True power changed lives, protected people, created opportunities, built futures. And standing there beneath the golden light, surrounded by a thriving kingdom, I finally understood something important. Healing had never been the weakest power. It had simply been waiting for someone to understand it. The end.